and CarMax. And where I left off was that I was kidnapped and tortured by the Arizona State Troopers, and they broke the window out of the back of my car. They put me in jail, went through 3 different courts because it was so bogus, and it ended up in Tina Ainley's court in the Arizona Superior Court. And my point of all that was that the car dealership knew about what happened, okay? Because it was a closed community. The people that were doing their surveillance, pretty much knew each other. They're a big community. The road gangs knew who the targets were. They knew each other. I had proof of that a couple of times before, when I would be coming off, like the time, I think maybe, I don't remember which time it was, but I had come off of some kind of a trip. And I went to get an oil change. And I had outsmarted some people during one of the events, and they absolutely refused to change my oil for me. Oh my God, I just remembered another thing that happened when I was being followed and tracked and tricked and manipulated by the road gangs. But let's just stop. It was a horrible time. Let's just go on to the Honda, GEICO, CarMax. When I went to Arrowhead Honda in Peoria, they knew about the situation that I was in. They knew that the courts were after me. They knew that the Arizona State Troopers were after me. And they were betting that I was not going to get out of it, that I wasn't going to get out of it alive, or I wasn't going to get out of it free. Because I went to take my car in for an oil change, and the car that they gave back to me was not the car that I gave them. Yes, they swapped my car during an oil change. Okay? As soon as I got in it, I knew it wasn't my car because the seating was wrong. The seating in this car was lower, and no matter how I tried, I couldn't get it back to where it was. And all of the acrylic fixtures inside the car, the radio screen, they were all worn. They weren't new. And the mats were dusty. It had a dusty look. And I knew they had swapped my car, but by now, I've been kidnapped by the Arizona State Police. I've been thrown in jail. My car has been vandalized. I'm being followed. Where I'm living, I can't stay anymore. I'm being gang stalked by my neighbors there. I'm not able to deal with the fact that the dealership stole my car. And I'm also still in a state of disbelief, okay? Sometimes things are so horrible that you can't even admit to yourself that what is happening is happening. You just dissociate, you just go numb, you just try to think outside yourself. I mean, I had a lot of pressing issues, right? So I knew it wasn't my car, but there was nothing I could do about it, okay? Because I'd also noticed that my car would be in a parking lot, and one day it would have a tire with a red brake on it, and the next day it wouldn't. That the new tire I bought from Sam's Club, it was gone off my car. I noticed that the tires looked worn and old, but there was nothing I could do about it, right? Because I was going to be evicted from my apartment soon, because I wasn't going to pay them when I needed to pay to relocate, right? I mean, they had upped the rent so much that I didn't have any savings that I could really rely on, because I kept investing in my businesses, thinking that any day my businesses would pay off, because I didn't know that all the crooks at GoDaddy were stealing any advertising revenue that I was getting, and I was spending all my time sending traffic to my site, right? And developing and sending traffic to my site and paying the rent on the site for the business package, right? So I'm paying, Cox Data, I'm paying them, and I don't even have a secure connection, and they can't give me a secure connection. And then I'm paying GoDaddy, and they've got hackers Hackers who worked for Sonora website development who were reported to the Better Business Bureau for being prosecuted for stealing advertising revenue. Okay, so it's just the acceptance of criminality and the acceptance of crookedness and the normalization of crime by Europeans, and that was what I was dealing with. So I packed the trunk of my car with the essentials, knowing that I'll have to leave at any moment. The constable lets me know that he'll give me a heads up when it's time to go. So the constable shows up to evict me. And they give me like a half an hour to collect my things because I had relaxed a bit by then. And I get everything and I load it in my car, and I know that I have to keep moving. I know that if I stop or try to spend the night in my car, that they're going to pick me up for vagrancy, and then they'll have an excuse to put me in jail. They'll have a reason, right? So by now, also, Tina Ainley is trying to have me under a Rule 11, which is a mental status process where they try to determine if you are sane enough to be represented, to represent yourself, to understand the court. And if you want to see how that turned out, by then I was in Brownsville, and you can look at Sue Ann Decker on, I think it's on YouTube. I think you can see Sue Ann Decker on my other channel on YouTube. I think I posted it a while ago. Anyway, it's all so unpleasant, but it's all documented if you can find it. I mean, if you can search Facebook and you can search Twitter, you can find it. But for the most part, they keep my data hidden. It doesn't come up in searches. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it does. So now they want to do a mental health exam, and I know that that can go either way. And I actually go to the appointment where the social worker or the clinical psychologist, he runs away. Okay. First, he tries to sexually blackmail me, and he smells like dirty sex. And he wants me to come in the office, and I let him know I'm broadcasting this for my audience. And he ran down the hall. But he wrote a report that his diagnosis is that I'm a schizophrenic. Okay? So in his office, he could have had them come and take me away right then and there if he determined that I was unsafe. But instead, he's the one that ran away because his eyes were red from doing drugs. And he was obviously a sexual predator because he kept saying to me, if I'm not satisfied with this conversation, I'll have to write a report if you don't cooperate. He kept talking ambiguously about me cooperating, right? I'm so sorry that I have to tell you all of this. And I'm even sorrier that I had to live through all of this and everything else. But the people at Arrowhead Honda stole my car, and they swapped it out for a car that had rust damage on it. The back exhaust was, I'm so sorry, it was so obvious. And I even published pictures of the rust. I published pictures in LinkedIn as well with notices for Honda, but nobody's going to stop them. Nobody stopped them. So Arrowhead Honda took my 2020 car, and because they figured that I would be committed to a mental institution by Tina Ainley, or thrown in jail by Tina Ainley of the Arizona Superior Court of Arizona, because they had heard that through the grapevine, they thought it would be okay to rob Honda Financial, GEICO Insurance, and myself by stealing my 2020 unimpressive Honda vehicle, Honda Accord Sport. Not very sporty, but that's the decal they put on it. And they swapped it out for a salvage vehicle, a vehicle filled with rust. You could see the rust on the seat guides. You could see the rust on the bottom of the car, and all of the tires were treadbare, including the tire that I bought from Sam's when there was a hole poked in it because they had come and stolen the good tire and replaced it with a tire with a nail in it. But the nail in it went straight up. There's no way you can drive over a nail and have the nail straight up. But when I went to the same Honda dealership and the nail was straight up, and I said, you can't have a nail straight up like that, they just laughed at me. They thought it was really funny. But that wasn't as bad as when the mechanics at Sam's Club menaced me with a wrench and threatened to beat me with a wrench until a very nice Mexican man who is a politician said, I'm going to report you. I'm going to report you. I know the owner of Sam's in Arkansas, and I'm going to report you. That's just wrong. And he defended me because they were going to beat me because they had damaged my Honda Civic Hybrid. They had bent the rim on the wheel, and I had to actually go to Showcase Honda in Scottsdale, I think, to get them to fix it because they just were mean Europeans. They were just mean, vicious road gang European men that wanted to hurt me and hurt my vehicle. And that's what they did. And that's the truth. I don't understand it. I don't understand how people like that can face themselves, but they do. And they thought it was funny. And when I accused them, they threatened me with physical harm. Sorry, I'm seeing it in my mind's eye. I'm seeing the scene. It's not pleasant to see. It's complex post-traumatic stress trauma. It really is. So Arrowhead Honda stole my car and swapped it out for a salvage vehicle. Okay? Now on my way out of the city, by the time the constable lets me know it's time for me to go, I know that means it's time for you to run. They're closing in on you, right? Because if the psychologist had said I'm schizophrenic, they could send men after me to take me into the psychiatric ward. And then they could hold me there until they thought that I was sane enough to go through the trial for an offense that I never committed. So you see how they would have gotten me, and that would have been the end of it. And then they could have forced drugs on me. They could have killed me. Anything could have happened because they were trying to kill me until they saw my social media. The Arizona State Trooper Crawford had driven me to the African safari where there is no public attraction, but I think that's just where they put the murdered black people. And he was going to shoot me in the head. I could see it in his mind. And I'd been talking to him while he was torturing me and twisting my back the entire time. And he was going to shoot me, but he got a message to abort the plan. He actually had to stop the vehicle on the edge of the road where there's a drop-off and take his computer out of the vehicle into the headlights of the trooper car, so that he could be sure that he was being told to turn around. And then he turned the vehicle around. And we went to the dog shelter first, and then he took me to jail, where one of the jail guards tried to rip off my clothes. He broke my belt. But then an observer came in, and 5 or 6 other jail guards came running out of a room where they had been watching this attempted rape on video. I'm not going to go through the rest of it. You know, they put me in a cell that was a concrete cell, maybe 7 feet by 7 feet, with a hole in the middle that you could hardly keep from touching, where you could go to the toilet in public if you had to. So Arrowhead Honda stole my car, swapped it out, because they thought that I was out for the count and that they wouldn't get caught. So on my way fleeing Arizona, when the constable came, I left and I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I didn't stop. Okay, I made one stop to buy a supply of marijuana because I was headed towards Texas, and I wanted to be sure that I didn't have to find a place to buy marijuana because it was illegal in Texas. But I didn't find any. Anyway, so I'm driving, and I go and I drive nonstop all the way to Austin, Texas. Now, I said a little while ago that Elon Musk lives in Austin, Texas, but he has made absolutely no contributions to the suffering people of Texas after the electrical outage. He has not donated food or water or shelter, nothing. And a lot of donations have come in. Even Centerpoint Energy made a donation according to the radio broadcast. But Elon Musk, world famous billionaire known for his humanitarianism, gave nothing, just like he did in San Francisco when he took over that building. He doesn't care about any Americans. He only cares about the European investors and himself and the other Nazis. So I go to Austin, and in Austin, I stay in a Motel 6, and I can't afford to stay in Austin. It's just too expensive in the cheap hotel. And somebody steals my birth certificate and my social security card that I had in a box in my trunk. I didn't know that you should keep all your personal documents with you, and your computers too. Just carry it all into the room. And I don't know, and I learned in Riverside when I stayed in a hotel there that if you walk your dog, don't be surprised if they enter and search your room and accidentally take the remote control from the TV out so you know they were there. Don't be surprised if people search your room. That's why when you travel alone, you're extremely vulnerable, because there are so many predators that not only follow you on the highway so they can wait until you go to the bathroom and break into your car, but when you stay in the hotel, they will break into your car. So at this particular hotel, there was a very slippery stair that I almost fell on. I almost slipped on this stair, and there was a man standing in the shadows. And I thought, wow, if I had fallen and busted my head, he would have just stolen my identity and carried on. Because when you look at my cell phone, you can see that I don't get any personal calls. So you pretty much know that I'm a person with nobody looking out for her, a person you can eliminate and steal the identity. So they stole my birth certificate. I mean, I paid like $50 to get those birth certificates, those authenticated birth certificates from New York. And they stole my social security card as well. And they repacked my trunk. Yeah, repacked my trunk. So I didn't stay in Austin. Austin was very hostile. I could feel a lot of hostility, and it was too expensive. So I went to Brownsville because I thought that if things got bad, I could go to Mexico and escape the European nationalist law enforcement. I didn't know that the border to Brownsville was very complicated, that the international bridge was very complicated, and that there were a lot of very vicious-looking Spanish-speaking officers at that border, and that the border is very narrow, and that the police of Brownsville will follow you to the border and park their car and watch you if you stay in the parking lot or anywhere over there. So I didn't know all that. So I go to Brownsville because I know that I can't get very far with the tires on my car. And when I was trying to leave Phoenix on the highway from Phoenix to Tucson, I had the road gangs throwing small projectiles at my windshield. They were breaking my windshield. They cracked my windshield. Now, I had known that they had done this before, because you'd be driving on the highway and all of a sudden a rock would hit your car. Because if you had an electrified windshield, the thieves would want to steal that and swap it out of your new car and give you an ordinary windshield with no electronics in it. And that's what happened to my Honda Hybrid. The Honda Hybrid had a windshield with electrical things around, and the criminals kept throwing rocks at my car on the highway. And you're like, where would rocks come from, right? I mean, it's the but it's in the middle of a little city. There are no rocks. So I knew this trick they had, and I also learned from watching the road gangs how to hide in the blind spot of the car in front of you. So they couldn't aim at my car because I was right up on them. And when I wasn't right up on them, I was in their blind spot. Okay, but they were still able to crack my windshield because they wanted to stop me from leaving the state at any cost, because they knew that they had stolen my car and that I was driving a salvage vehicle, and they were afraid that in another state they would get found out and caught. Right? So all the way to Tucson, I'm driving with incredible stress. And I don't know if I was driving into the sun, but just incredible stress, because I'm surrounded by these road gang cars and they're trying to break my windshield out. So they cracked the windshield. The windshield's cracked. When I get to Brownsville, I try to call GEICO to get the windshield fixed, but they are not responding. They're not calling me back. They're not giving me the claim number. And I'm too busy trying to deal with the court system. And I'm too busy trying to have, I don't know, I was going through a lot, I mean, by then my belly was pretty big, and I was, feeling a sense of awareness that I was carrying DNA for other families for when we leave the planet, and other kind of crazy stuff like that. I was aware that I had made a deal to carry the DNA like a storage unit, human body, because the clones of these great people had been destroyed by the diseases that they deployed. And they wanted these great people to be born again in the new world. And I had the proof of it in the size of my belly. In fact, it still shows. It's still a presence. But it could also just be the aliens that I got from jail. I mean, the people in the jail might have just done something like this and infected me with some alien presence. I don't really know. We'll just have to see. But every inclination that I have, every message I get from the divinity is yes, 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 you are a great mother. Yes, 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 there are DNA storage in your body for the new world you're going to be living in. These people must be preserved and reborn, and their system of regeneration has been destroyed. They have to have an original created all over again. Their original cannot be duplicated. So that's more way out there stuff. I'll have you thinking I am a schizophrenic, but I'm not. The stuff I'm telling you is completely true. Arrowhead Honda stole my car because they thought I wouldn't be able to protest. When I call GEICO, they're ignoring me, right? So I get to the point where I finally get over this thing with Sue Ann Decker that's been hanging over my head. I finally have Tina Ainley's court off my case. They finally closed the case. I don't know if it was with or without prejudice, and I don't even know what that means, but it was one way of that or the other. But do you know that after I left the city, Tina Ainley's court found and called the members of my family and told them I was a fugitive? and that if they gave me safe harbor, they would be under penalty of law. They did that. They called my family. They found the phone numbers of my family and called my family. And I believe they probably got them because they confiscated my iPad and my iPhone, and they kept them for months. And I could tell after examining them that they had been turned on and tampered with. So they probably got it directly from my contact list, from the phone they confiscated. And then they classified it as a different kind of property than the kind of property that they made it. It was so horrible. It was also horrible because they violated the laws. They violated so many laws, and they violated my humanity. So, Arrowhead Honda stole my car. I called Honda Finance Company, where I've been a customer since 1995. Wait a minute, was it 95? Yep. I've been a customer, I think, since 1994 with American Honda Finance. And because of my great credit standing, I was always able to get, those low interest deals. And I told them what had happened. And I asked them to keep, surveillance. And I asked them to join me in the investigation and the prosecution of the thieves. I did. And when I came to Houston, I was trying to figure out where I would go next. I mean, I kind of really wanted to go to Mississippi. I still do. But I figured that the European nationalist racists are really out of control in Mississippi. And I would probably be in more danger in Mississippi than I would be in Arizona. So I was thinking, no, not Mississippi. I was thinking, well, you could always join all the other senior citizens in Florida. Maybe things will work out there. But I was like, no, Florida has hurricanes and tornadoes. And I didn't want to be in Texas for the hurricanes and tornadoes either. So I was thinking, well, you know what? I think I'm just going to go back to Connecticut. And I wasn't thinking straight there because I'm sure that Diego Hernandez would try to catch me in New York if I try to go back to Connecticut, because he's a prosecutor there and he's Juan Luis Hernandez's brother. And I'm pretty sure Juan Luis Hernandez would have a word or two for me if I ended up there. And with his police connections and his CIA connections, I'm sure that he could dispose of me this time for sure. I wouldn't be able to run away to California like I did when he threatened me in 2013. So I wasn't sure where I was going to go. So that's why I wasn't in a huge hurry. But I knew I had to get my windshield, at least the windshield, fixed, right? I wasn't even thinking about the rest of the car because I was too busy worried about so many other things. Like, would Texas come after me now that they know Arizona wants me? And what's going to happen? And if the case was dismissed in the way where they can open up the charges again, what if they open up the charges? I just didn't know. But the closer I examined my car, the more I realized that, as incredible as it seemed, my car, my 2020 Honda, had been stolen. And all of the memories came back to me of when I got in the car and the seat was too low, and how I could never adjust the car, and how somebody bolted one of the exhaust pipes on and they weren't shiny anymore, and all these other things. They duplicated all the damage that my car had gone through, because it had a busted fender on the passenger side from when I got deceived by a truck. It acted like it wanted me to move. And when I moved, I ended up bumping into a very low, big post on the entrance to some Indian land where there was a lot of gun shooting happening near Wickenburg. So they deliberately tricked me into bumping into this post, and I didn't even bump it very hard, but it crushed the fender. And then I had the window that was broken out by the Arizona State Troopers, and I think that there was some scratches on the side. I don't know, but the car was damaged. It had physical body damage, and they duplicated the damage when they gave me the substitute car. And so that was a part of the deception. It just took me a while. I was dealing with so many other problems. It took me a while to really put two and two together and then overcome the disbelief and horror to actually believe that the Arrowhead Honda had stolen what was supposed to be a 2020 car. And I found out that you can print VIN numbers, and I found out all this stuff. And then I saw all the rust here and the rust there, and the tires were so worn that they were cracked. And one of them had just been bought within the past year. And the car was a 2020 car. And we're in January, February of 2022, I mean. So the car isn't even 2 years old. And it's got rust, all this. Okay. So when I talk to GEICO, they won't even fix the windshield. They won't even fix the windshield. So as they're not fixing the windshield, I'm noticing all the other problems that I'm having because I didn't want to do anything in Brownsville because I didn't trust the mechanics. It seemed like a really kind of a backward town in many ways. And I didn't trust the Honda dealerships there. And Houston's a bigger city. I figured I'd do okay here. And when I called them, so I actually went to John Eagle Honda and I asked them to look at the car, and they would not admit that the car had rust or anything. They wouldn't help me at all. They stood in solidarity with their auto workers union people at Arrowhead Honda in Peoria. And when one guy did validate that the car part didn't look right, he was removed from the job the very next day. When I called him the very next day, they had moved him to another company or fired him. He was gone. He was out of the company. And the service manager, Mr. Santiago, he just played it out. He just played it out. So they ended up stealing my car, and nobody would verify that they stole my car. I went to different claims agents, one after another. They could all see the rust on my car, and none of them would report that this is no way this is a 2020 car. They would just look at what was supposed to be the proof and say, well, you know, it says these tires were manufactured in such and such a year. But when a road gang that's traveling all over Arizona turns their tires in, they're going to be super worn, a lot more worn than mine were. So GEICO refuses to honor my claim for the windshield. They refuse to honor my claim for the broken window. They refuse to honor my claim for the broken fender. They tell me that I have to produce the police report. So I get another police report, and this would be the fourth version of the story. And you can see that the charges were fabricated. Fleeing the law from what? Right? So GEICO decided that the only people I could talk to resolve the case were the people in Arizona, Tucson, Arizona. And I ended up talking to a guy named Sean Demeter and another guy. I don't remember all their names, but there was one fraud investigator. They put me in the fraud department. And they had a fraud investigator. And when I would try to tell him what happened, all he would do would be to talk about my arrest to trigger a complex post-traumatic stress reaction in me. and he frustrated all of my attempts to tell him the story. He would not authorize any fixes on my car because once they tried to replace the windshield, they would find all the other rust within that vehicle. And they could tell by the age of the tires that the tires should not have aged that much for the amount of mileage on the car. So they just kept me in a runaround for, wow, over a year. Over a year, I was begging them and pleading with them to fix my vehicle. So somewhere around there, I called Honda Finance to see if they would join me in trying to prosecute these criminals. I called the Peoria Police Department, and the officer made fun of me and asked me, how did I know? And just asked me a lot of round-around questions, a lot like the fraud investigator in Tucson working for GEICO. So GEICO made it clear that they were going to cover for Arrowhead Honda. They made it clear that they were not going to replace my stolen car or the value of my stolen car. They were not even going to admit that my car had been stolen. They were simply going to let me deal with whatever and continue to pay the insurance and continue to pay the car note. So I stopped paying the car note. And I told Honda, this is not a 2020 Honda. This is a salvage vehicle. It's full of rust. And Honda decided to repossess the vehicle. So in March of 2023, they repossessed the 2020 vehicle. That was a salvage vehicle filled with rust, with old tires, with a broken window, with a crushed fender, and another dent somewhere. And the fender was falling off and rusting. It was obviously not a 2020 car. So that's what GEICO did. GEICO refused to honor my claim, although I've been a customer of GEICO on and off between them and Progressive. They've been the only insurers that I've used. So I started with GEICO and I ended with GEICO on my Hondas and on my 1982 Celica. It was an 82 Celica, not an 84. So Toyota Celica. So GEICO did not have any respect for my loyalty to their company, no respect at all. Instead of honoring my claim, they tortured me with the fraud investigator in Tucson. They would not let my case go national. When I called the California office, they ended up shutting down for several days or a week when I reported it there. And I also reported it to Connecticut, and they said, we're sorry, there's nothing we can do. So I told my story to so many GEICO representatives. I would just call to tell anybody that answered the entire story, hoping that somebody would have a conscience or a sense of honor and some power to get things done. Arrowhead Honda stole the car and replaced it with a salvage vehicle because they thought that the corrupt judiciary of Arizona was going to have me gone, and gone. When I wasn't gone, and made it to Texas, GEICO used the fraud department to intimidate and deny me. And they had the Texas representatives try to send me a document from Top Golf or Top something insurance where they wanted me to sign something that said any claim or legislation goes under them, that they have all control over all my claims. And I refused to sign it because they wanted to take control of everything. I refused to sign it completely. So Honda Financial did nothing officially except repossess the car. Okay. Now, Honda repossessed a rust bucket salvage vehicle with dead tires worth what? 20-something thousand dollars probably on the contract, 18,000, 20,000, on the contract, right? And they repoed that. GEICO refused to honor any of my claims, not even for the windshield or the fender. And they accused me of fraud, but didn't prosecute me for fraud, and used all the conversations to hurt me with the memories of the way I had been kidnapped and tortured. Now, that's what GEICO and Honda did. Let me tell you about CarMax. CarMax was sending me updates on my vehicle, and the last two updates they sent me said that the vehicle with that VIN number was sold to somebody in Mississippi. Yeah, Mississippi. By a lake. I looked it up. I probably have the email somewhere in my email stack. But CarMax never reported the damage on that car. They reported that that car had never been in any accidents, even though when that car was repoed, it had at least 3 incidents of body damage: the windshield, the back fender, and the window on the passenger side back seat door. So CarMax created a fraudulent history for that car so that when the next buyer, probably young, probably unexperienced, probably Black or Spanish speaking Americans, probably sold to Americans, they ended up looking at CarMax and thinking there was nothing wrong with that car. And they could have painted over the rust to hide it. They could have done a number of things. But CarMax created fraudulent documents verifying that that car was in good condition, that that was a good car, that that car had never been in any accidents, and it had. And that's the end of my story. Okay? CarMax, GEICO, Honda, American corporations that violated the trust of the consumer completely. And there's no recompense. There's no 60 Minutes report. There's no news story about it on CBS in Phoenix. And I published it and I put tags on it. And everybody with power to make it known knows. You see? But everything is under control. Everything is under control. And if they don't want you to see the stories of what's really going on with the corporate investors and the CEOs and the way business is being run in America, then you will never see. Because all the good guys are silenced. I mean, they've got me living in a concentration camp with no car. And if I had a car, who would insure it? GEICO? Oh, and doesn't the state require? States require insurance. So you don't even have any choice. You don't even get to say, well, why should I get insurance when the insurance companies are filled with thieves? Thank you for joining me.